Imagine looking in the mirror for 23 years and not knowing who you are. Imagine discovering that the woman who raised you, the woman you called mom, was actually the person who stole you from your crib. The summer of 1987 in New York City was suffocating. On August 4th, the city was trapped in a brutal heat wave, but for 19-year-old Joy White, the heat was the last thing on her mind. Her newborn daughter Carlina, only 19 days old, was burning up with a terrifying 104-degree fever. Joy rushed her to Harlem Hospital, her heart pounding against her ribs. She was a young mother, fragile and desperate, clutching her child as if she could pull the fever out with her own hands. The hospital was a chaotic labyrinth of fluorescent lights and the smell of antiseptic. Doctors admitted the baby immediately. As Joy stood in the hallway, exhausted and trembling, a woman approached her. She was wearing a crisp, white nurse's uniform. She looked professional, calm, and most importantly, she looked kind. This woman put a hand on Joy's shoulder and whispered words of comfort that felt like a lifeline. "Go home, honey," the woman said. "Get some rest. I'll watch over your little girl. She's in good hands." Joy had no way of knowing that she was looking into the eyes of a predator who had been haunting the hospital halls for weeks, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Joy White returned to the hospital in the early hours of August 5th, her body heavy with a sense of dread she couldn't explain. She walked toward the pediatric ward, expecting to see her daughter recovering. Instead, she found a scene of clinical stillness. She reached the crib where Carlina had been resting, but all she saw was a flat, white sheet. No baby, no pink blanket. The silence in the room was deafening. Panic set in like a physical blow. Joy began to scream, her voice echoing through the sterile corridors. Nurses rushed in, doctors looked confused, and security guards fumbled with their radios. The realization hit the hospital staff like a lightning bolt. Carlina White was gone. The woman in the white uniform, the woman who had offered comfort, was nowhere to be found. The investigation later revealed a staggering series of security failures. The video surveillance system was broken. The staff didn't verify IDs. The kidnapper had simply picked up the child, disconnected the IV drip, walked out of the front door, and vanished into the crowded streets of New York City. For the next 23 years, Joy White lived in a state of suspended animation. The NYPD launched one of the most massive manhunts in the city's history. They released sketches of the fake nurse, they interviewed hundreds of witnesses, and they offered a reward that grew every day. But the trail didn't just go cold, it evaporated. Every time the phone rang, Joy's heart stopped. Every time she saw a little girl with dark curls in the park, she wondered, is that her? The psychological toll was devastating. Joy and Carlina's father, Carl Tyson, found it impossible to look at each other without seeing the ghost of their missing daughter. The grief was a silent killer that eventually tore their relationship apart. They were trapped in a uniquely American nightmare, the missing child poster that never gets taken down, the birthday candles that are never blown out. Little did they know, their daughter was alive, living less than 50 miles away, being raised under a false name by the very woman who had destroyed their lives. In Bridgeport, Connecticut, a girl named Nesdra Nance was growing up in a world built on a foundation of lies. Her mother, Ann Petway, was a woman with a dark past and a history of legal trouble, but to Nesdra, she was the only mother she knew. However, as Nesdra grew older, the shadow began to emerge. She looked at family photos and realized she didn't share a single feature with Ann or anyone in the Petway family. She felt like a puzzle piece forced into the wrong box. Ann's behavior was erratic, sometimes overly protective, other times distant and cold. There were no baby photos of Nesdra in the hospital, no stories about the day she was born, and most suspiciously, no birth certificate in the house. When Nesdra hit her teenage years, she began to ask questions. Every question was met with a wall of anger or a confusing story. The sense of displacement was so strong that Nesdra began to feel like a ghost in her own life, sensing that the woman she called mom was hiding a secret so big it could shatter the earth beneath their feet. The turning point came in 2010. Nesdra was now 23 years old and pregnant with her own daughter. This new life growing inside her intensified her need to know her own origins. She needed a birth certificate to get prenatal care and health insurance. She sat Ann Petway down and demanded the truth. The confrontation was explosive. Ann, backed into a corner, finally confessed, but only a half-truth. She claimed that a woman, a drug addict, had handed Nesdra to her in a park in New York and never returned. She claimed she saved her. This revelation was a physical shock to Nesdra's system. She realized her entire identity was a fabrication. She wasn't a Nance. She didn't know who she was, where she came from, or even when her real birthday was. But she didn't believe the abandoned in a park story. She felt, deep in her bones, that she had been stolen. Armed with nothing but a suspicious confession and a burning intuition, Nezra began her own investigation. Every night, after the world went quiet, she sat in the glow of her laptop screen, diving into the dark archives of missing person websites. She wasn't just a woman searching the web. She was a detective hunting for her own ghost. She spent hundreds of hours on the website of the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, NCMEC, scrolling through thousands of faces of infants who had vanished in the late 80s. She looked for specific details. Harlem, 1987, hospital abductions. Her eyes burned from the glare of the screen, but she couldn't stop. She was looking for a connection that defied logic, a facial feature, a date, a feeling. She began to realize that the story she was told about being abandoned in a park didn't match any of the police reports. Then, on a cold night in early 2011, she found it. A missing person poster for a baby named Carlina White. The date of the disappearance matched the timeline of her own life. The location was right, but it was the age progression photo that stopped her heart. The computer-generated image of what Carlina would look like at age 23 was like looking into a haunted mirror. It was her. Nezra didn't hesitate. She picked up the phone and called the NCMEC hotline. Her voice was trembling as she uttered the words that no operator expects to hear. "I think I'm one of the children on your website." The case was immediately reopened, and the news sent a shockwave through the NYPD. Within days, detectives were dispatched to Georgia to collect a DNA sample from Nezra. Back in New York, Joy White and Carl Tyson received a call they had long since stopped expecting. The police told them there was a young woman who believed she was their daughter. Joy's reaction was a mix of paralyzing fear and desperate hope. She had been disappointed so many times before by false leads and cruel hoaxes. She lived in a state of agonizing suspense for days, waiting for the lab results that would either heal her soul or break it forever. The DNA test was the final judge. When the results came back, they were 99.9% conclusive. Nezra Nance did not exist. Carlina White had finally been found. The reunion was a media circus, but behind the cameras, it was a raw, psychological earthquake. After 23 years, Joy White finally held her daughter again. But the tragedy of kidnapping is that it doesn't just steal a person, it steals time. Carlina was no longer the 19-day-old infant Joy had lost. She was a grown woman with a child of her own and a lifetime of memories with the woman who had stolen her. This wasn't a simple happily ever after. Carlina was caught in a brutal, emotional tug-of-war. She felt a biological bond with Joy and Carl, but she also felt a twisted sense of loyalty to Ann Petway, the only mother she had ever known. The American public watched in fascination as Carlina struggled to navigate this new reality. She had to learn her real name, her real history, and face the fact that her entire upbringing was a criminal act. The trauma wasn't over, it was just changing shape. While Carlina was rebuilding her identity, the legal system was hunting for Ann Petway. Knowing the walls were closing in, Ann initially fled, becoming a fugitive. The FBI and local authorities launched a multi-state manhunt. She eventually surrendered in Bridgeport, Connecticut, facing federal charges for kidnapping. The trial was a moment of reckoning for the entire country. Ann Petway's defense tried to paint a picture of a woman who was desperate for a child after multiple miscarriages, but the prosecution was relentless. They highlighted the calculated nature of the crime, the nurse's uniform, the disconnected monitor, the decades of deception. In 2012, Ann was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. During the sentencing, the judge looked at Ann and said, "You inflicted a 23-year life sentence on this family." The justice was served, but for Joy White, 12 years felt like a drop in the bucket compared to the 2 decades of birthdays and milestones that had been stolen from her. Today, the case of Carlina White remains a landmark in American criminal history. It changed how hospitals handle infant security, leading to the high-tech Code Pink systems and electronic tags we see today. But more importantly, it stands as a testament to the power of the human spirit. Carlina didn't just wait to be found. She reclaimed her own life through sheer will and the power of the internet. Her story has been the subject of books, movies, and endless documentaries. But the real story is in the quiet moments of her life today, navigating the complex relationship with her biological family and raising her own daughter with the truth she fought so hard to find. She is a reminder that while shadows can be traced and secrets can be buried, the truth has a way of breathing through the cracks of even the most elaborate lies. Carlina White's journey from a stolen infant to a self-made hero is the ultimate proof